Greetings. This is a rather quick introduction to the deliberately developmental conversation. So I'm going to say a little bit about what a DDC is and explain the kind of procedure for going about engaging in a DDC. Okay, so the purpose of a deliberately developmental conversation, a DDC, is to help another person gain greater awareness of the meaning-making assumptions, beliefs, and triggers that determine how they see a particular situation or circumstance. So all of this is based on the assumption of the understanding of the nature of human consciousness, which is that at any given moment, in relation to a particular situation or circumstance, how we operate in relation to that situation or circumstance is determined by a hidden meaning making that's going on every moment. It's going on right now for you. And much of that meaning making is hidden from us. And that meaning making is constituted by assumptions, beliefs, and triggers, and other things as well. So the purpose of the DDC is to help another person gain awareness of that meaning-making structure as it relates to this particular situation or circumstance. So particularly if such a situation or circumstance is challenging, we become blinded. There's something about what happens. When we get emotionally triggered, especially, we lose our ability to kind of see ourselves. And so the DDC helps another person gain awareness, helps them to start to see themselves. And all of this is in service of making room for a greater range of choice in how they might be in relation to this particular situation or circumstance. And so what we notice, and what seems to be borne out in the research in transformational learning, is that when people become aware of that meaning making that determines how they understand the world around them, that very awareness itself makes room for a greater degree of choice. So when I can be aware that there are certain situations that trigger me, and I can actually be aware of the nature of that trigger, chances are I can feel it start to happen in real time. And I gain some greater ability for making choice in how I'm going to operate in that moment. Okay, so that's the purpose of a DDC. So let's walk through the different layers, because DDCs, they're not stages so much, but they're layers. And so you could say that there are 6 layers in a DDC. And the first layer, the kind of underlying foundational layer, has to do with full presence, which is being with another person. And if you can't be with this person with whom you're about to engage a DDC, you don't want to try to engage in the DDC, because you're going to come across as trying to manipulate them, trying to get them to do something. It's just not going to go well, right? So it starts with full presence. You're being able to be with that person. And what it means to be with another person is to let another person be how they are. It also means allowing them in. So compassion means that you feel with the person, that you allow that person into yourself. You allow whatever it is that's going on into you, to the degree that we can feel another person. Our presence, they feel that presence. And that is oftentimes, that alone creates a huge opening, a huge space in which real disclosiveness and openness can happen. So that's kind of like the main thing here. The second layer, assuming that you are in full presence, is actually observing and sensing what's going on, right? And so this is what we refer to as full listening. So you're listening, you're sensing for and in the other. So you're kind of like, you're sensing you're hearing their words, maybe discerning their meaning, perhaps. You're noticing their mannerisms, their energy. You're getting a feel for who this person is in their manner of speaking as it relates to whatever it is that they're talking about. You're also noticing your own reactions. So I'm present to and aware of, where my own triggers. I mean, oftentimes I might get triggered in a conversation. So I want to notice that and be able to manage that so I can stay present and so I can actually hear what the person is saying as opposed to what that trigger might be filtering it into, right? So these are, I'm paying attention to, I'm sensing and observing my own feelings and reactions, and even my reflections. Certain thoughts might come up for me, right? And then also noticing and paying attention to the quality of relatedness, the nature of the conversation, possible assumptions, what beliefs might be operating. Are we playing it safe in this conversation? So these are all among the things that we're listening for. And two, what we're not getting overly absorbed in, though, is the content of that person speaking. So we're not trying to figure out, we're not trying to understand, what it is that they have to say about the situation, right? Oftentimes we can't understand it, and we start to go into rabbit holes and we try to absorb the content. And the other thing too is that sometimes how this person is talking about something, or maybe the situation they're describing might generate a visceral reaction in you, and you want to not get overly absorbed in that. Okay, third layer. So as full presence and full listening start to shape themselves, at some point you might start to say what you're noticing, what you're saying, you're sensing, and this is the articulating what's going on. So for instance, you might say to that other person, so I'm noticing that that's the third time you've said whatever, and you leave it at that. You don't elaborate it, you don't try to do anything with it. Oftentimes in these kinds of conversations, less is more. You might even say something like, I find myself getting lost. So this is where I'm kind of giving a report on my own internal state. I'm actually a little lost. Now, the thing is that I'm not telling them that I'm lost in order to help me find my way in their content. I'm giving that in terms of, like, it's almost like feedback. This is a form of feedback, right? Letting them know the impact of their conversational manner on me. I might want to say what I'm noticing about the conversation, right? So this is all tracking the three elements of full listening, right? So, I'm noticing that this conversation seems to be going around in circles. We started here, we ended here, and now we're back to where we started. Or I'm sensing a kind of guardedness in our relation, or in our relatedness right now, or in the manner of this conversation. All along, you're wanting to be as neutral as possible. So this is true all the way along here. Now, I want to hasten to add here that, you don't want to be peppering them with, what you're sensing, what you're observing, so, like if this is a 10 or 15 minute conversation, you're probably going to share maybe 5 of these or 6 of these, or something like that. So you don't want to hold back, but you also don't want to be, kind of showering them with these things. And then the next layer, sort of building on articulating what's going on. At some point, maybe you've made a couple of articulations, and you might offer a thought that you're having. So this is the layer of what we call what I make up, because it's about unzipping your head, but it's being very, very explicit about the fact that this is your head that you're unzipping. You're not giving a report on the nature of reality as it relates to this other person. So it goes something like this. So what I make up is that you're holding yourself back, right? So notice that I'm saying an opinion, or I'm saying, it's more than a mere observation. It's a kind of, maybe even an assertion of some sort, but I precede it with what I make up, which signals to the other person that I'm not saying that this is necessarily true, but this is what I make up, right? Take it or leave it. What I make up is that you're tired of putting up with that behavior. So this may be a situation where in which this person is sort of being stepped on by other people. And not because I believe so, but because I have the sense that maybe they feel that they are being stepped on. And so I might offer what I make up along those lines. What I make up is that you're making this a lot harder than it is. So again, I want to be clear that this is not me giving, like pontificating upon them and telling them, how it is. I'm just simply in a friendly manner offering a thought that might or might not be useful to them. The fifth layer, something that we want to do, and just to go back, so again, what I make up, you don't want to be peppering them with what I make ups either, right? It can be really overwhelming. Just a handful in a 10 or 15-minute conversation is plenty. I want to occasionally check in with people, especially if the conversation's a little bit longer. So how does that land for you? So I might have offered an observation, I might have articulated what's going on and offered a what I make up. And maybe it's a little dicey what I've just said. And so I might ask them, how does that land for you? How do you see it? What do you take from what I'm saying? And so on. So this is a way of checking in. And it's also checking in as a way to, in a sense, give this other person perhaps a brief rest. And then finally, there are inquiring or exploratory questions. And these are questions that are designed to open something up for them. So they tend to be open-ended. They're not disguised as advice, right? So they're not disguised as what I make ups. They're designed to help another person explore new territories. And it helps to point that other person to new aspects of the situation. So I just want to, and then finally, distinguishes their inner sense-making landscape. And so I think this is the important part, because this gets back to the purpose of the DDC, which is to offer that other person, or to help that other person increase awareness of their own inner meaning-making or their own inner sense-making landscape. And here are some examples of exploratory questions. Sorry, it says conversations. I meant to say questions. So for instance, what did you make up about that? So that points directly to their own meaning making, right? What's the most significant thing about that? What in your thinking makes this seem the way that it is? So can you see how, I'm not going to go through all of these, but can you see how these kinds of questions are designed to point the person toward awareness of their own meaning making? So I'm about to complete this introduction, but I think the thing I want to say about questions is that you'll notice that questions is the final layer. And I feel that questions, and this is my own feeling about it, that I feel that questions are vaguely invasive. And because it's an explicit direction to the other person to listen to me and to go the direction that that question is pointing them into. So I feel that questions, in a sense, can be diversive for the other person. And so I tend to use them somewhat sparingly, depending on the nature of the conversation. And especially as you're first learning DDCs, probably holding off from asking too many questions until you can start to get the feel of the rhythm of dancing, because ultimately these are steps. These are kind of like, those, you've seen those pictures of the dance steps that show the dance steps. But after a while, you get the feel for the dance and you won't need to be thinking about all of these things. And so I encourage you to practice DDCs with other people. Okay, so thank you very much.